We shall commence this module by discussing about the international trade. In today's context, nations do not remain isolated. The economy consisting of the service sector and industry along with the income and employment is linked to the partner in trade. This linkage is formed through the international movement of goods and services. Other kinds of linkages are established through investment, technology and business enterprise in general. This has favorable as well as unfavorable impacts on related economies. International trade is unique since transactions are carried in different currencies and steps are taken by one country to improve its balance of trade, which has a rebound effect on others. All these factors make international economics as an applied economics requiring the study of gains from trade, pattern of trade, protectionism, balance of payment, exchange rate determination, coordination in international policy and international capital market. International economics studies how the independent economies of world interact with one another in the process of allocating the scarce resources to satisfy the human wants. It deals with the economic and financial interdependence among nations. It analyzes the flow of goods, services, payment, monies and people between a nation and the rest of the world. The policies directed at regulating these flows and these effect on the nation's welfare. This economic and financial interdependence influences the political, social, cultural and military relations among nations. The field of international economics has emerged as a specialistic field of economics over the past 2 centuries with contributions from some of the world's most distinguished economists from Adam Smith to David Ricardo, John Stuart Mill, Alfred Marshall, John Maynard Keynes and Paul Samuelson, who have developed in depth and width over time by a lot of theoretical, empirical and descriptive contributions. International economists view the world as a community of separate states, each with its own constellation of natural resources, capital, labor and knowledge, its own social and economic institutions and its own economic policies. Like many other disciplines, international economics has also 2 distinct parts, theoretical and descriptive. Theoretical international economics, the theoretical part tries to go beyond the phenomena to seek general principles and logical framework which can serve as a guide to understand the actual events. Like any other economic theory, it uses for this purpose abstractions and models often expressed in the mathematical form. It can be further divided into pure and monetary theory, each containing the aspects of both positive and normative economics, although these aspects are strictly intertwined. The pure theory of international trade, which has a microeconomic sense, covers mainly the effects of trade on production, consumption and distribution of income and effect of trade on relative factor prices and product prices, gains from trade and distribution of gains, etc. The international monetary theory, which is of a macroeconomic nature, deals with the matters pertaining to the balance of payments and international monetary system. It covers the areas such as causes and methods correcting the balance of payments disequilibria, exchange rate determination, international liquidity, etc. Descriptive international economics. The descriptive part is concerned with the description of international economic transactions in the way they happen and of the institutional environmental in which they take place. This covers international flow of goods and services, flow of international financial and other resources, international organizations like IMF, World Bank, regional development banks, WTO and so on. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the scope and nature of international economics, learn the historical developments in the modern trade theory, understand the theory of absolute advantage, evaluate the implications of the absolute advantage theory, analyze the international institutions and India in the international scenario. Let us now understand the scope and nature of international economics. The subject matter of international economics can be studied in two parts, namely international trade and international finance. However, looking at the diverse aspect of the world economy, we can explore four different windows on the modern world economy. These are international trade, international production, international finance and international development. International trade theory and policies. They are the microeconomic aspects of international economics as they deal with individual nations treated as single units and with the relative price of individual commodities. International production. Here the production of a product in multiple countries is taken into account. At the broadest level, international production can take place through two modes: contracts, that is international licensing and franchising, and foreign direct investment undertaken by the multinational enterprises. These two modes are a major component of the world economy. International finance. They play an increasingly important role in the world economy, referring to the exchange of assets among countries. Since balance of payment deals with the total receipts and payments as well as with the adjustment and other economic policies that affect the level of national income and the general price of the nation as a whole, thus they represents the macroeconomic aspect of international economics. They are also referred as the open economy macroeconomics. International development. It is the fourth and the final window on the world economy. The processes of international trade, international finance and international production reflect the many goals of their participants. However, it is hoped that these three processes will continue to improve the level of welfare and standard of living throughout the countries of the world. It is thereby necessary to evaluate the processes of the international trade, production and finance support or undermine the international development. Let us look into the connecting window. Each of the four windows on the world economy, trade, production, finance and development offers a view, but each has a frame. That is, each window offers some insight into the world economy, an insight that needs to be supplemented by one or more windows. This helps us to be cognizant of the connections among the four aspects of the international economics that you will explore in the subsequent modules. In today's liberalized era, countries interact with one another, thereby imposing some restrictions on the flow of goods, services and factors across their borders, but not internally. In addition, international flow are to some extent hampered by differences in the language, customs and laws. Moreover, the international flow of goods and services leads to the payment and receipts in foreign currencies which often change in value over time. There are common fallacies of international trade. Let us discuss them one by one. First, trade is a zero-sum activity. If one trading party gains, the other has to lose. However, trade can bring benefit to both the parties. The larger joint output provides the basis for mutual gains achieved by both. Second, imports are bad and exports are good. It has become quite popular today. It is seen that imports lead to a reduction in the level of employment and act as a burden on the economy, while the exports promote growth and employment. This fallacy stems from a failure to consider the link between import and exports. Third, tariffs and quotas save jobs and promote higher level of employment. It is the failure to recognize that a reduction in imports does not occur in isolation that this fallacy arises. The trade restrictions that reduce the volume of imports will also reduce exports. As a result, jobs saved by the restrictions tend to offset the jobs lost due to the reduction in exports. Moving on to discuss India in international economy. Until 1990s, the issues discussed so far under international economics were affecting the Indian economy on a conservative basis. But with economic reforms implemented by the central government, Indian economy is closely aligned with the global economic activities. International boundaries have opened up as seen by the reduction in import duties to the total imports. There is no field in the Indian economy that is not touched by the international economics. With evolutionary advances in transport, communication, coupled with the disappearances of the distances, all countries are economically interconnected. It is not certain whether even big countries like India, USA and China can survive if they were to close their borders to any overseas trade. This economic interdependence of countries is indicated by the continuous rise in the volume of imports and exports, capital inflows, overseas travel, multinational corporations, etc. This increasing economic interdependence of countries has serious implications on the domestic economy caused by the division of labor. Some countries are forming groups like OPEC to protect their common interest. These issues are addressed in international economics. The world economic, financial and political system is regulated by 4 specialized international institutions: the World Trade Organization, World Bank, International Monetary Fund and United Nations. Let us discuss the historical development of modern trade theory. Modern trade theory is the outcome of an evolution of ideas in economic thought. In particular, the writings of the mercantilist and later those of the Adam Smith and David Ricardo have been instrumental in providing the framework of modern trade theory. Mercantilist view on trade. During the period 1500 to 1800, a group of writers from countries such as England, Spain, France, Portugal and the Netherlands were concerned with the process of nation building. Specifically during 17th and 18th centuries, they wrote essays and pamphlets on international trade that advocated the philosophy of mercantilism. According to Gray, mercantilism was conditioned by 2 things: perpetual neediness of government and effect of the discoveries of precious metals and their inflows to the European economies. It promoted government regulation of a national economy for the purpose of augmenting the state power at the cost of rival national power. Mercantilists maintained that a nation can become rich and powerful if its exports are more than its imports. The resulting export surplus would then be settled by an inflow of bullion or precious metals, primarily gold or silver. Thus, the government needed to do it all in its power to stimulate the exports and discourage or restrict imports. However, since all the nations could not simultaneously have an export surplus and the amount of gold and silver was fixed at any particular point in time, one nation could gain only at the expense of the other nations. The mercantilists believed that national interests were basically conflicting in nature. Let us now discuss the features of mercantilism. Maintaining a surplus in the balance of trade and accumulating gold were the keys to prosperity. Next, bullion and treasure were the essence of wealth. Next, to regulate foreign trade in order to maximize social welfare. Next, to promote industry and import cheap raw materials but not food materials. Next, promoting colonism where the ruler with more gold could maintain the larger and better armies. Next, place heavy tariffs on the imported manufactured goods. Next, encourage exports of manufactured goods. Next, state intervention is essential to solve the problems of society and regulate all economic activity. It preached the economic nationalism as it believed that nation could gain only at the expense of the others. Next, we shall discuss the criticism of mercantilism. Too much importance was given to gold and silver. Next, the mercantilist overemphasized commerce, trade, but undermines agriculture. Next, it wrongly believed in the concept that favorable trade only leads to prosperity of a country. Next, lacked universal applications due to the lack of scientific system of thought. Next, moreover, it assumed wrongly that in a foreign trade, when one country gains, the other losses, thereby a mutually advantageous trade is possible between countries. Next, the adverse effects of continuous favorable trade were ignored by many mercantilists except Thomas Mun. Next, it was a temporary and short-term policy which cannot be undermined as it provided strong basis for the capitalism. Now, the mercantilist static view of the world economy where trade was regarded as zero-sum game was challenged by Adam Smith with his publication in 1776 Wealth of Nations. According to Smith, international trade is actually a positive sum game where the nations take the advantage of specialization and the division of labor, which further increases the general level of productivity within a country and thus increases the world output. According to the dynamic view of Smith regarding trade, both the trading partners could simultaneously enjoy higher levels of production and consumption. Smith's trade theory is explained further in the next section. Now, we will further move to discuss the theory of absolute advantage which was given by Adam Smith. Adam Smith, a classical economist, he was a core believer of free trade on the grounds that it promoted international division of labor. This forms the basis for pure theory of international trade. The absolute advantage theory states that a nation will gain the most from producing the products that take the advantages of its most readily available resources. This implies that easier access to particular materials and other similar elements will make a country best suited for the specific kind of production activity. It includes the increased efficiency and cost saving. When a nation has an absolute advantage, it has something that is desirable to the other nations, which inspires trade. According to the absolute advantage theory, out of two or more parties, the one that produces more products with the same resources has the advantage. For example, if two companies each have 5 employees and one can produce 10 units per hour while the other can produce 12 units in the same period, then the second company has an absolute advantage. A country following the theory of absolute advantage would produce the products that work best with its resources. There are some assumptions of the absolute advantage. Let us know them. The trade takes place between two countries. Next, only two commodities are traded between the countries. Next, it advocated for a laissez-faire policy where free trade exists between the countries and leads to the efficient use of resources and would maximize the world welfare. Next, labor is the only element of the cost of production. Now, moving on, when one nation is more efficient or has absolute advantage over another in the production of one commodity, but is less efficient than the other nation in producing another commodity, then both nations can gain by each of them specializing in the production of the commodity of its absolute advantage and exchanging the part of its output with the other nation for the commodity of its absolute disadvantage. By this process, the resources of both nations are utilized most efficiently and the output of both the commodities will rise. The increase in the output of both commodities measures the gain from specialization in production available to be divided or shared between two nations through trade. Illustration of absolute advantage. Absolute advantage can be examined with a simple numerical example. In the table provided below, it shows that 1 hour of labor time produces 6 bushels of wheat in United States, whereas only 1 in India. On the other hand, 1 hour of labor time produces 4 yards of cloth in United States, but 5 in India. Thus, we can see that United States is more efficient than or has absolute advantage over India in the production of wheat, while India is more efficient than or has an absolute advantage over United States in the production of cloth. With trade, United States would specialize into the production of wheat and exchange part of it for the Indian cloth. The opposite is true for India. Now, if the United States exchanges 6 bushels of wheat for 6 yards of Indian cloth, then the United States gain 2 cloth or saves 30 minutes of labor time, as United States can only exchange 6 wheat for 4 cloth domestically. Similarly, 6 wheat that India receives from the United States is equivalent to or would require 6 hours of labor time to produce in India. These same 6 hours can produce 30 cloth in India. By exchanging 6 cloth, which requires a little over 1 hour to produce in India, for 6 wheat, with United States gain 24 cloth or saves almost 5 hours of work. Thus, it is clearly demonstrated that two countries can gain through international trade if they have absolute advantage in producing different goods. However, gains from international exchange of goods need not be limited to the situations of absolute advantage. Let us now understand the implication of absolute advantage theory. More quantity of both products are produced. Next, there is increased standard of living of both countries. Next, it leads to increase in production efficiency. Next, the global efficiency and effectiveness of the countries increases. Next, there is maximization of global productivity. Absolute advantage theory was criticized because there does not exist absolute advantage for many countries. Next, country size may vary while analyzing their absolute advantage. Next, there may be country by country differences in specialization. Next, it deals with labor only and neglects other factors of production. Next, it neglects the transport cost, which however plays significant role in international trade. Next, it takes scale economies, however large scale economies may reduce the cost of production and form a part of absolute advantage, but this theory neglects it. Now, we will summarize what we have learnt in this module. International economics is an applied economics requiring the study of gains from trade, pattern of trade, protectionism, balance of payment, exchange rate determination, international policy coordination and international capital market. The subject matter of international economics can be studied in two parts, namely international trade and international finance. International trade, international production, international finance and international development form the four different windows on the modern world economy. Mercantilists believe that the way for a nation to become rich and powerful was to export more than it imported. The resulting export surplus would then be settled by an inflow of bullion or precious metals, primarily gold or silver. The mercantilist static view of the world economy, where trade was regarded as zero-sum game, was challenged by Adam Smith with his publication in 1776, Wealth of Nations. According to Smith, international trade is actually a positive sum game. And according to the absolute advantage theory, a nation will gain the most if it produces products that take the advantage of its most readily available resources. When one nation is more efficient as compared to the other in the production of one commodity, but is less efficient than the other nation in producing the second commodity, then both the nations can gain by each specializing in the production of the commodity of its absolute advantage and exchanging the part of its output with the other nation for the commodity of its absolute disadvantage.